Reporter Joe Little shows why a lot of people in RVs and trailers will have to find a new place to park.
If you're living in an RV right now, this video could explain why your life is about to get a lot harder. In 2026, at least 15 laws quietly changed, and together they're dismantling RV life piece by piece. Parking rules, inspections, power hookups, even whether your RV can legally exist. None of this was voted on loudly, and once these rules hit your city, it's already too late. In 2026, updated electrical safety standards quietly took effect that fundamentally changed how 30-amp and 50-amp RVs connect to campground power systems. The stated goal is fire prevention and better load management, but the real-world impact falls hardest on older RVs built before modern surge protection, grounding standards, and arc fault expectations became common industry practice. Many campgrounds, especially those upgrading their infrastructure, are now installing new electrical pedestals with stricter automatic fault detection. These advanced systems can immediately shut off power if an RV's internal wiring does not meet updated grounding or polarity standards. RVs manufactured 10 to 20 years ago are the most affected. Owners arrive at campgrounds, plug in their rig, and the pedestal immediately trips offline, leaving them without any electrical power. The financial impact adds up extremely fast. Quality electrical adapters, surge protectors, or comprehensive electrical management systems now cost $200 to $600. And in more serious cases, full electrical panel upgrades can easily exceed $500 to $3,000. Campgrounds are not legally required to provide legacy hookups for older RVs, and many now explicitly state no guarantee of electrical compatibility in their updated 2026 policies and reservation terms. This electrical change affects far more than casual weekend travelers. Industry estimates suggest approximately 60% of RVs currently on American roads are over 10 years old, and many full-time RV residents rely on these older rigs because newer models cost $120,000 to $300,000. Losing access to electrical hookups means losing refrigeration, climate control, medical equipment power, and basic livability. As of January 1, 2026, California enacted a major land use change allowing limited, low-impact RV camping on agricultural land, including working farms and ranches. On paper, this legislation appears to expand legal places where RVs can stay. But the actual reality on the ground is considerably more complex and restrictive. The new law allows short-term RV stays explicitly tied to agritourism activities, seasonal agricultural work, or direct landowner permission. However, it also imposes strict operational caps, limited numbers of RVs permitted per parcel, short duration stays, mandatory sanitation requirements, and comprehensive local government oversight with enforcement authority. Individual counties retain the legal power to impose additional rules, permit fees, and inspection requirements. For RV residents, this creates a split outcome. In some rural areas, landowners can now legally host 2 to 5 RVs at a time, offering viable alternatives to chronically overcrowded commercial campgrounds. In other counties, local governments are using this same law to actually tighten enforcement, requiring annual permits that cost $500 to $2,000 and inspections that many small landowners simply won't pursue. This legislative change matters significantly because California has one of the largest RV dwelling populations in the entire United States, with estimates consistently exceeding 150,000 people living in vehicles statewide. Traditional RV parks throughout California are essentially full, with average monthly site rates now exceeding $1,200 to $1,800 in many regions. The 2026 shift is fundamentally structural. RV camping on farmland is now explicitly regulated through formal channels, not informally tolerated through unofficial arrangements. That legal clarity genuinely helps some RV residents, but it simultaneously gives local authorities clearer enforcement tools to shut down non-compliant stays. Ventura County, California, implemented a comprehensive new ordinance in 2026 that explicitly prohibits overnight RV parking and camping on designated rural roads near agricultural zones throughout the county. Official enforcement began January 1, 2026, accompanied by permanent installation of no overnight parking signage along affected road corridors. The stated official justification includes protecting farm access routes, reducing illegal dumping and trash accumulation, and preventing long-term encampments from forming along rural roads. The practical effect is the removal of dozens of previously tolerated roadside parking corridors that RV residents, especially agricultural workers and retirees on fixed incomes, had used for years as affordable parking alternatives. Violations carry escalating financial penalties designed to force compliance. Initial citations typically range from $75 to $150, but repeated offenses can quickly lead to vehicle towing. A single tow operation often exceeds $600, with additional daily storage fees of $75 to $100 accumulating rapidly. After a short holding period, impounded vehicles may be auctioned at public sale, even when those vehicles are someone's documented primary residence. What makes this policy change particularly severe is basic geography. Ventura County sits strategically between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara, two regions currently experiencing extreme housing shortages and skyrocketing rents. RV parks throughout the county consistently report near-zero vacancy rates, and available safe parking program alternatives are extremely limited and often waitlisted for months. This is not a symbolic or loosely enforced ban. It represents a targeted, systematic removal of RVs from rural buffer zones that previously functioned as essential overflow housing. In 2026, those parking spaces no longer exist legally anywhere in Ventura County. In 2026, cities across the United States, especially concentrated in California, significantly expanded laws that allow police and code enforcement officers to ticket, tow, or forcibly remove RVs parked on public streets, even when those vehicles remain fully registered and mechanically operable. The fundamental legal shift comes from municipalities redefining RVs as non-standard vehicles specifically for habitation purposes, legally separating them from ordinary passenger cars in updated municipal codes. This reclassification allows cities to impose targeted nighttime parking bans, strict length restrictions, and explicit habitation prohibitions without appearing to ban vehicle parking outright. Enforcement windows typically focus on overnight hours, usually 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., directly targeting people sleeping inside parked RVs. Individual citations commonly range from $50 to $250 per night, and accumulating multiple violations can quickly trigger expensive vehicle towing and impoundment. The affected population scale is genuinely large. Current estimates suggest over 900,000 Americans now live in RVs nationwide, with many forced into vehicle dwelling because apartment rents rose 20 to 40% since 2020, while wages remained largely stagnant. Cities actively enforcing these expanded laws frequently lack sufficient emergency shelter capacity or safe parking program alternatives, leaving displaced RV residents with absolutely no legal parking options. The substantive 2026 change is not about newly emerging homelessness. It's about systematically removing previous tolerance. What was once selectively enforced through occasional warnings is now routine, increasingly automated through license plate readers and driven by explicit municipal policy directives. For hundreds of thousands of Americans, these expanded enforcement policies eliminate the last remaining legal space to simply exist overnight. In 2026, many municipalities nationwide significantly expanded their legal definition of inoperable or unsafe RVs, allowing immediate removal based primarily on exterior condition rather than actual drivability. An RV can now be legally tagged and towed even when it runs perfectly, drives normally, and maintains current registration. Common removal triggers now include cracked windows, visible exterior body damage, water leak stains, expired safety inspections, non-factory modifications or additions, or general age-related deterioration. Once officially tagged by code enforcement, owners typically receive only 24 to 72 hours to completely correct identified issues or physically move the RV elsewhere, an impossible timeline for people actively living inside with jobs and obligations. Financial consequences escalate extremely quickly under these policies. Standard tow fees typically range from $400 to $800. Daily storage charges add $50 to $100 per day. Administrative penalties and processing fees add another $100 to $300 after 30 to 60 days. In impound, some jurisdictions gain legal authority to auction or destroy the RV entirely, even when it clearly serves as someone's documented home. Vehicle owners remain legally liable for all unpaid fees regardless. This policy change disproportionately affects older RVs, which comprise the overwhelming majority of rigs owned by low-income and fixed-income households nationwide. With replacement costs for even used RVs now exceeding $80,000 to $150,000, Losing an existing RV to impound often means instant homelessness with zero housing alternatives. The substantive 2026 shift centers on enforcement discretion. Municipal authorities no longer need to prove actual mechanical failure, only visual deterioration or minor regulatory noncompliance to justify removal. In 2026, numerous local governments formally tightened legal time limits for RV stays, especially on private land and in semi-rural areas throughout the country. What fundamentally changed is not just the duration limit itself, but how aggressively these restrictions are now being enforced. New municipal ordinances now explicitly define RV occupancy beyond short durations as a serious zoning violation, even when the property landowner gives explicit written permission. Common newly imposed limits include 14, 21, or 30 total days per calendar year, after which the RV must physically leave the property entirely for extended periods. Some jurisdictions now require annual parking permits, scheduled inspections, and associated fees, ranging from $250 to over $1,000. Financial fines for noncompliance often start at $50 to $100 per day and can escalate rapidly with repeated violations. This legislative shift matters significantly because RV living has increasingly become a critical fallback housing option for working Americans. Since 2020, apartment rents have risen 20 to 40% nationally, while affordable housing construction has badly lagged behind population growth. Many families and individuals turned to RVs as a temporary housing solution, only to discover that temporary is now legally capped at extremely short durations. What makes the 2026 shift particularly serious is new legal clarity. Local governments systematically rewrote zoning definitions, so RVs are no longer considered acceptable long-term dwellings under health or zoning codes, regardless of sanitation hookups or utility connections. Once officially reclassified, enforcement becomes legally mandatory for code officers, not discretionary. For families, seniors, and working people using RVs to stay financially afloat, these new time limits convert a flexible housing option into a countdown clock, with escalating fines attached. In 2026, Malaysia implemented a comprehensive nationwide licensing and permit framework specifically for RV tourism, marking one of the most restrictive RV policy shifts anywhere outside North America. The new mandatory rules require RV operators, both commercial tour companies and certain categories of private users, to meet stringent roadworthiness inspections, safety certifications, and updated registration standards before operating legally on Malaysian roads. While this development may initially seem geographically distant and irrelevant, the underlying policy actually reflects a growing global trend. National governments formally regulating RV use rather than allowing informal recreational travel. Under Malaysia's new system, RVs used for tourism purposes must pass comprehensive inspections covering braking systems, electrical safety, emissions standards, and sanitation, with operating licenses renewed periodically. Compliance costs add up extremely quickly. Initial inspection and certification expenses can easily exceed $1,000 to $3,000, depending on modifications required to meet standards. Operators failing official inspections face substantial fines, vehicle impoundment, or outright operating bans. Even private owners occasionally renting RVs casually can be legally classified as commercial operators under the new regulatory definitions. The broader lesson matters significantly for RV residents everywhere. As RV use grows globally, national governments are increasingly treating RVs as regulated transport and lodging businesses, not simply personal recreational vehicles. What Malaysia enacted in 2026 directly mirrors policy proposals currently being discussed in Europe, Australia, and parts of North America. The fundamental shift signals that RV freedom is systematically shrinking worldwide, not through overnight blanket bans, but through layered compliance requirements that steadily raise costs and regulatory barriers until casual RV living becomes financially impractical for average people. In 2026, the practical impact of advanced clean trucks regulations became completely unavoidable for the entire RV manufacturing industry. These environmental rules require commercial vehicle manufacturers to progressively increase zero emissions vehicle production, indirectly but severely affecting gas and diesel motorhome chassis availability. RV builders rely heavily on a very small number of specialized chassis suppliers for drivable platforms. As those manufacturers redirect limited production capacity to meet mandatory electric vehicle quotas, significantly fewer traditional RV-capable gas and diesel chassis are being produced. The immediate result is widespread shortages, extended delays, and rapidly rising prices, especially concentrated in states adopting ACT standards early. Industry estimates show new motorhome prices increasing 10 to 20%, driven almost entirely by limited chassis supply rather than consumer demand. Some RV manufacturers have already paused or discontinued certain popular models entirely due to chassis uncertainty. Prospective buyers now face wait times of 12 to 24 months for new units, pushing many toward already stretched used RV markets. This supply disruption matters critically because used RV inventory is already stretched extremely thin nationwide. The average age of RVs currently on American roads now exceeds 10 years, and replacement options are increasingly unaffordable for average buyers. For full-time RV residents, a major mechanical breakdown that once meant expensive repair now increasingly risks permanent displacement and homelessness. The substantive 2026 change isn't a direct RV ban. It's a supply bottleneck. By constraining chassis availability upstream through environmental regulations, ACT rules fundamentally reshape the entire RV market indirectly, making RV ownership progressively harder without ever explicitly targeting recreational vehicles directly. In 2026, a rapidly growing number of campground operators nationwide began actively participating in shared digital databases, tracking problem guests. These information systems allow individual parks to permanently flag RV residents for unpaid fees, property damage, or alleged rule violations, and share that enforcement information across multiple campground locations. There is no single unified national registry, but regional and private campground networks are expanding these databases quickly. Once officially flagged in the system, an RV resident may be automatically denied future reservations without explanation. There is often no formal appeal process, and mistakes or false reports can follow people indefinitely across states. This enforcement shift matters significantly because campground access is already severely limited. With long-term RV sites chronically scarce and nightly rates rising sharply, often $60 to $120 per night, being blacklisted can completely eliminate the last remaining legal places to stay. Full-time RV residents are especially vulnerable as they rely on repeated access to the same campground networks for housing stability. What fundamentally changed in 2026 is normalization. Sharing guest behavior data moved from informal phone calls between friendly campground owners to structured digital systems, often tied directly to online booking platforms. Privacy protections are minimal, and enforcement standards vary widely between networks. For RV residents, a single billing dispute, missed payment, or noise complaint can now quietly close reservation doors nationwide, without warning, explanation, or appeal. The system operates largely invisibly until someone discovers they're suddenly unable to book sites anywhere. This creates a shadow enforcement system where RV residents can lose housing access without ever facing formal charges. In 2026, local governments across the entire United States significantly accelerated adoption of RV-specific parking restrictions, even outside traditional hotspot states like California. These new ordinances include overnight parking bans, length-based exclusions, and permit zones that effectively exclude RVs from legal parking. Many ordinances rely on vehicle length thresholds, typically 22 to 25 feet, which automatically disqualify most motorhomes and travel trailers. Other restrictions prohibit habitation outright, regardless of whether parking itself remains technically legal. Financial fines commonly range from $50 to $300 per night, with vehicle towing deployed as a standard escalation tool. The cumulative impact compounds extremely quickly. RV residents are forced into constant movement between locations, increasing monthly fuel costs by 15 to 30%, accelerating mechanical wear and expensive repairs, and severely disrupting employment stability, children's schooling, and medical care access. For those living paycheck to paycheck, this enforced instability is genuinely devastating. What makes the 2026 wave different from previous years is coordination. Cities are systematically copying ordinance language from each other, creating regional no-parking corridors that leave RV residents with nowhere legal to go within entire metropolitan areas. This isn't one isolated law, it's a recognizable pattern. By 2026, RV parking is no longer a gray area subject to officer discretion. It's being deliberately engineered out of urban life through coordinated policy. For hundreds of thousands of Americans living in RVs, these expanding restrictions don't just create inconvenience, They eliminate the basic ability to legally exist in public space overnight. In 2026, states nationwide began actively enforcing RV size, weight, and height restrictions that previously existed mostly on paper in transportation codes for decades. While these limits technically existed, enforcement was historically inconsistent. That changed dramatically as cities and states deployed automated traffic cameras, roadside sensors, and targeted traffic stops specifically for oversized vehicles. Common legal thresholds include length limits of 22 to 30 feet on local roads, height limits of 13 feet 6 inches under bridges and overpasses, and weight caps tied to axle ratings. Large Class A, motorhomes, and long fifth-wheel trailers are the most affected. Violations can trigger fines ranging from $150 to $1,000, forced rerouting, or being ordered completely off the road. The practical ripple effects are genuinely serious. Required detours increase fuel usage by 10 to 25%, while restricted access can completely cut RV residents off from hospitals, job sites, or campgrounds located on controlled roads. In mountainous or coastal regions, alternate legal routes may not exist at all. What fundamentally changed in 2026 is enforcement priority. Transportation agencies now treat oversized RVs similarly to commercial trucks, citing infrastructure protection and public safety. RV residents who carefully planned routes based on years of past tolerance are now discovering entire road corridors are legally closed to them. This enforcement shift disproportionately impacts older and lower-income RV owners who cannot easily downsize or replace their existing rigs. For many, their current RV represents their only housing, purchased years ago when they could still afford it. In 2026, states adopting California-style environmental rules significantly expanded emissions labeling and compliance requirements for RV engines, particularly diesel motorhomes. While RVs are not directly banned from roads, failure to meet documentation or labeling standards can completely block vehicle registration or resale. New requirements include verified emissions labels, engine family documentation, and compliance with updated testing thresholds in certain states. For used RVs, especially those built before 2010 to 2012 emissions changes, proper documentation is often missing or incomplete. The financial burden can be extremely steep. Emissions-related repairs or retrofits can cost $2,000 to $10,000, while non-compliant RVs may be denied registration outright by state motor vehicle departments. Sellers face rapidly shrinking markets as buyers actively avoid RVs that may be difficult to title. This matters critically because diesel pushers and large motorhomes dominate the full-time RV market. Many owners rely on them because they are extremely durable and already paid off. Losing registration eligibility effectively strands these RVs. The substantive 2026 change isn't a single federal law, it's the geographic expansion of enforcement zones. As more states align with stricter emissions frameworks, RV ownership becomes geographically limited, reducing mobility and resale value overnight. For RV residents, this creates a dangerous situation. An RV that's legal in one state may become illegal simply by crossing state lines. What was once a mobile housing solution becomes trapped by regulations. The emissions shift quietly converts RVs from nationwide housing into regionally restricted assets. In 2026, several states expanded or introduced mandatory safety inspections specifically for RVs, completely separate from standard vehicle inspections. These comprehensive checks go far beyond lights and brakes, covering electrical systems, propane lines, plumbing, and braking performance. Inspection failures can result in registration denial until all repairs are completed. Costs vary widely. Inspections range from $100 to $300, while required repairs often exceed $1,000 to $5,000, especially for older RVs. This change impacts older rigs most severely. Industry estimates suggest over 60% of RVs on the road are more than 10 years old, many owned by retirees or fixed-income households. What once passed informal checks now fails formal inspection standards. The stated justification is safety, but the timing matters critically. With housing costs soaring and RV living increasing, inspections act as a financial gatekeeper, determining who can legally remain mobile. In 2026, inspections are no longer rare or optional. They are becoming a condition of registration, quietly raising the minimum cost of RV ownership and pushing marginal owners out. As solar and lithium battery systems exploded in popularity, 2026 brought new safety standards governing installation and certification. RVs with aftermarket lithium systems must now meet UL certification and labeling requirements in many jurisdictions and campgrounds. Non-compliant systems can lead to denied campground hookups, failed inspections, or insurance coverage disputes. Retrofitting to compliant components often costs with $500 to $4,000, depending on system size. This matters because lithium upgrades became common survival tools, powering refrigeration, medical devices, and climate control. Many full-time RV residents installed systems themselves over the last 5 years, often without anticipating future compliance rules. The 2026 shift formalizes what was once DIY territory. Campgrounds and insurers increasingly demand proof of compliance to reduce fire risk. RV residents without documentation are being turned away. This change doesn't ban solar. It professionalizes it, raising costs and creating barriers for low-budget RV residents who relied on self-installed systems to remain off-grid. In 2026, at least one U.S. state implemented enhanced training or certification requirements for drivers towing large RVs or operating heavy motorhomes. These rules target rigs above specific weight thresholds or those equipped with air brakes. Requirements may include additional testing, coursework, or endorsements. Costs range from $200 to over $1,000, depending on training depth. Failure to comply can result in citations or insurance complications after accidents. This reflects a growing concern. RV accidents involving oversized rigs are increasing as more inexperienced drivers enter RV living due to housing pressure. Rather than improving infrastructure, states are shifting responsibility to drivers. The change matters because RV driving was historically treated like standard passenger vehicle operation. In 2026, that assumption is fading. RVs are increasingly treated as specialty vehicles, with higher expectations and barriers. By 2026, many jurisdictions explicitly folded RV living into anti-camping and homelessness enforcement laws. RVs are no longer treated as vehicles first, but as mobile encampments subject to relocation orders. Penalties include fines, mandatory move-along orders, vehicle seizures, and bans from entire districts. In many cities, enforcement occurs even when no shelter beds are available. RV residents face constant displacement. This matters because an estimated 900,000-plus Americans live in vehicles, many employed and paying taxes. RV living became a housing substitute, as rents climbed 30 to 40% since 2020. The 2026 shift is ideological. RV living is no longer tolerated as a gray area solution. It is increasingly framed as a problem to be removed. For many, losing an RV doesn't mean inconvenience. It means instant homelessness with no fallback. This isn't about RVs anymore. It's about who still gets to.
Dozens of people living in tents and RVs are being offered new places to live. This following a major cleanup operation at an encampment in Gardena.
A luxury RV lot overrun by squatters, trash piling up, trailers burning, and safety concerns growing.
Living in an RV used to be a last resort. In 2026, it's becoming a crime. Families with jobs, kids, and nowhere else to go are being fined, towed, and erased, not because they broke the law, but because housing failed them. This isn't homelessness anymore. It's criminalization. Across America, cities are redefining what counts as shelter. RVs, vans, and trailers are now classified strictly as vehicles, not housing, even when families live in them full-time. This legal shift eliminates all housing protections. There's no right to remain, no eviction notice requirement, and no obligation for cities to offer alternatives. Between 2020 and 2025, median rents jumped 30 to 40% nationwide, while wages rose only 15 to 18%. As affordability collapsed, hundreds of thousands of families turned to RVs as their last option. Instead of addressing costs, cities responded by reclassifying RV habitation as code violations, not housing needs. By 2026, many municipal codes explicitly prohibit sleeping, cooking, or storing belongings inside vehicles. Families can be cited simply for existing. Once cited, enforcement escalates rapidly. Warnings become fines. Fines become towing orders, and towing eliminates shelter completely. The critical issue is legal framing. Governments claim they're only moving vehicles, not displacing people. In reality, families lose their only roof. This terminology removes accountability while accelerating homelessness. What makes this particularly devastating is the speed of consequences. A family can receive a citation on Monday, accumulate fines by Wednesday, and face impound notices by Friday. The system treats shelter as a parking violation, stripping away stability through bureaucratic language rather than acknowledging the human cost of enforcement without alternatives. What used to be a parking issue has transformed into criminal enforcement. Cities nationwide are passing ordinances prohibiting overnight parking, sleeping, or remaining in vehicles beyond set time limits, even on public streets. Enforcement typically begins between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., the exact hours when families have nowhere else to go. By 2026, enforcement data reveals sharp increases in vehicle habitation citations. Fines range from $75 to $250 per violation, with some cities issuing citations daily. Within 1 month, a family can accumulate $1,500 to $3,000 in fines, exceeding most emergency savings. Failure to pay doesn't pause enforcement. Unpaid citations trigger registration holds, court summons, or impound orders. Once an RV is impounded, retrieval costs often exceed $2,000 to $5,000, not including daily storage fees. Most families never recover their vehicle. This transforms survival into a legal trap. Families rotate streets constantly, sleep in short intervals, and avoid lights or generators to prevent detection. Criminalization doesn't reduce homelessness. It forces constant motion where stability becomes impossible and enforcement replaces solutions. The psychological toll is measurable. Studies tracking displaced families show stress-related health conditions increase 40 to 60% within 3 months of continuous displacement. Children miss 30 to 50% more school days. Medical appointments are skipped. Employment becomes unstable when sleep deprivation affects performance, creating a downward spiral where enforcement directly causes the instability it claims to address. One of 2026's most overlooked realities is that many RV-dwelling households are employed. Surveys from multiple metro areas show 40 to 60% of vehicle-dwelling adults hold jobs in healthcare support, logistics, construction, retail, and food services. Despite employment, these families are labeled illegal occupants because their shelter doesn't meet zoning or habitation codes. Income no longer protects against displacement. A parent can finish their shift, pick up their child, and still receive citations for sleeping in their RV that night. The math is unforgiving. In many cities, 2-bedroom apartments now exceed $2,200 monthly, while median take-home pay for service sector households remains under $4,000. After food, fuel, insurance, and childcare, nothing remains for rent. Criminalization creates devastating feedback loops. Citations interfere with work schedules. Court dates cause missed shifts. Towing eliminates transportation to employment. Once jobs are lost, families are reclassified from working poor to chronically homeless, even though enforcement caused the collapse. Consider a typical case. A nursing assistant earning $17 hourly works 35 hours weekly, generating roughly $2,400 monthly after taxes. Rent consumes $2,200, leaving $200 for utilities, food, transportation, and healthcare. One unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, or childcare gap, forces impossible choices. The RV becomes shelter, then citations begin, then employment unravels. The system treats this mathematical impossibility as moral failure, punishing families for economic gaps they didn't create. As housing costs exploded, social services didn't scale to match demand. Instead, enforcement budgets grew. Many cities now spend more per person on citations, towing, and police overtime than on emergency housing placement. Ticketing is politically cheaper than housing. Citations cost cities little to issue but generate revenue or justification for removal. In contrast, temporary housing averages $80 to $150 per night per family, with no quick resolution. By 2026, waiting lists for assistance often exceed 12 to 24 months. Families seeking help are told no available units, yet enforcement continues without pause. This creates impossible contradictions. Shelter is unavailable, but remaining unhoused is illegal. Data from enforcement-heavy regions shows citation volume doubling while housing placements remain flat. This proves the goal isn't resolution, it's removal. Ticketing shifts burdens onto families who already cannot pay, ensuring ongoing legal system contact instead of stability. The financial comparison is stark. In one major city, annual enforcement costs per displaced family averaged $4,800 in citations, towing, court processing, and police hours. Meanwhile, the same city's emergency housing voucher program served only 12% of applicants due to funding limits. Society pays enforcement costs repeatedly while refusing one-time housing investments. The result is predictable: debt accumulation, court involvement, and permanent displacement, all without adding a single affordable home. Enforcement becomes self-perpetuating revenue generation disguised as public policy, where the appearance of action replaces actual solutions. When an RV is towed, homelessness becomes immediate and absolute. Unlike tents or encampments, an RV contains everything: shelter, transportation, medication, identification, work tools, school supplies, and personal records. Towing happens fast. In many cities, once an RV receives multiple citations, authorities can tow with 24 hours notice or less. Retrieval requires proof of registration, insurance, and payment of all fines, often totaling $3,000 to $7,000. Most families cannot recover their vehicle. Once sold or scrapped, there's no appeal that restores shelter. Parents lose ability to reach work. Children lose stability overnight. Medical equipment and prescriptions are frequently lost permanently. This is why towing isn't enforcement, it's eradication. It doesn't relocate families, it dismantles lives in one action. After towing, families transition from RV living to street homelessness, where risks multiply and recovery becomes exponentially harder. Towing ends any remaining path back to stability, and it's increasingly used as first resort, not last. Storage lots become graveyards for working families' lives. One impound facility in California holds over 200 RVs belonging to families who couldn't afford retrieval. Inside are photo albums, children's artwork, work uniforms, tools representing years of accumulated stability. The lot charges $75 daily storage. After 30 days, ownership transfers to the facility. Families lose not just current shelter, but years of possessions, with no compensation or acknowledgement of the cascading harm caused. By 2026, tens of thousands of children live full-time in RVs with their families, not by choice, but because housing costs outpaced wages. When RV habitation becomes criminalized, children absorb consequences first. School stability depends on fixed addresses, consistent sleep, and reliable transportation. Enforcement destroys all three. Many school districts require proof of residency to enroll or remain enrolled. When RVs are forced to move repeatedly, families struggle maintaining enrollment, leading to frequent transfers, learning gaps, and higher dropout risk. Federal protections exist on paper, but enforcement varies widely. Children living under constant citation threats experience chronic stress. Studies show housing instability increases anxiety, depression, and behavioral challenges in children by 30 to 50% compared to housed peers. When nighttime sweeps occur, kids are often awakened by police lights and knocking, events mirroring trauma responses seen in disaster displacement. Once families are cited or towed, child welfare agencies may become involved, not because of abuse, but because families lack stable housing. This creates dangerous paradoxes. The state criminalizes shelter, then penalizes parents for instability it caused. Educational impacts are measurable and severe. Children experiencing housing displacement show 25 to 40% declines in standardized test scores within one school year. Attendance drops significantly. Social relationships fragment with each move. Long-term studies show displaced children are 60% more likely to drop out before graduation, limiting lifetime earning potential and perpetuating poverty cycles that enforcement claims to address. Safe parking programs were once presented as humane compromises, designated areas where families could legally sleep in RVs overnight. By 2026, many programs are shrinking or disappearing entirely. Funding cuts, neighborhood opposition, and political pressure have reduced capacity instead of expanding it. Most safe parking programs serve fewer than 50 vehicles, while cities often have thousands of RV-dwelling households. Even at peak operation, less than 10% of need is met. As enforcement increases, demand spikes, but availability collapses. Waiting lists now stretch for months, with eligibility rules tightening. Some programs exclude families with older RVs, minor code violations, or multiple occupants. Others limit stays to 30 to 90 days, after which families return to criminalized streets. The quiet removal of these programs allows cities to claim alternatives exist while making them inaccessible in practice. When programs close, enforcement doesn't pause, it accelerates. Families are cited for not using services no longer available. This creates compliance traps. Families are told to use available resources, yet those resources are structurally insufficient. Safe parking was never a solution, but its removal exposes cities choosing enforcement over expansion. In one California county, safe parking capacity dropped from 85 spaces to 22 between 2024 and 2026, while the estimated RV dwelling population grew from 800 to over 2,000 families. Meanwhile, enforcement citations increased 340%. The message is clear: visibility reduction through displacement, not stability through support. In 2026, enforcement rarely begins by acknowledging homelessness. Instead, it starts with technical violations, expired registration, insurance lapses, cracked windshields, broken lights, or emissions failures. These issues are common among financially strained households, and they carry legal consequences. Once cited, families enter cascades. Registration holds prevent renewal. Insurance premiums rise or become unaffordable. Without compliance, RVs become unroadworthy, triggering impound eligibility. Shelter is lost through bureaucratic escalation, not direct eviction. This method shields cities from legal challenges. Officials claim neutral enforcement of traffic laws, even when those laws disproportionately impact RV dwellers. Data shows vehicle habitation citations cluster in low-income zones, not tourist or commercial districts. For families, Fixing mechanical issues costs $500 to $2,000, money they don't have. Failure to fix accelerates enforcement. Compliance becomes mathematically impossible. By weaponizing vehicle codes, cities achieve displacement without acknowledging housing responsibility. The system punishes poverty indirectly, converting financial hardship into legal non-compliance, then using that non-compliance to justify removal. Consider registration requirements. Most states require annual renewal costing $50 to $200, plus proof of insurance averaging $100 to $300 monthly for older RVs. A family surviving on $3,000 monthly cannot simultaneously afford rent, insurance, registration, food, and fuel. When forced to choose, registration lapses. That lapse becomes the legal justification for impound, completing displacement through paperwork rather than honest acknowledgement of housing system failure. Homeowners associations have become key drivers of RV displacement. By 2026, many cities actively coordinate with HOAs, responding to complaints with rapid enforcement sweeps near residential zones. HOAs often frame RVs as nuisances or safety concerns, regardless of actual behavior. Once complaints are logged, cities prioritize those locations for ticketing and towing. This creates enforcement hotspots based on visibility, not harm. Private neighborhoods influence public policy. Even when RVs are parked legally on public streets, HOA pressure can trigger parking rule changes or targeted patrols. Families are pushed from area to area, narrowing legal options with each move. This coordination blurs lines between public governance and private preference. Families lose access to streets funded by their own taxes, while enforcement serves property value preservation over human need. The result is geographic exclusion. Entire neighborhoods become off-limits to unhoused families, accelerating segregation by income and housing status. The mechanics are revealing. One suburban city's internal emails show direct HOA city coordination. HOAs submit complaint maps marking RV locations, city enforcement responds within 48 hours, and follow-up sweeps occur weekly until areas are cleared. Public streets become privately controlled through complaint-driven enforcement. Families report being approached by HOA representatives demanding immediate departure from public parking, despite lacking any legal authority. When families refuse, citations appear within hours, proving coordination that prioritizes aesthetics over constitutional rights to access public spaces. As enforcement intensifies, families are forced farther from job centers. Urban RV bans push households into rural zones where land is cheaper but services are scarce. Commutes stretch to 60 to 100 miles, fuel costs rise, and job retention becomes impossible. Rural areas lack public transportation, school support, and medical infrastructure. Once pushed out, families lose access to systems that kept them functioning. Isolation replaces opportunity. This outward pressure creates invisible displacement. Cities appear cleaned up, while homelessness spreads into deserts, industrial corridors, and agricultural regions, areas never designed to absorb it. By 2026, homelessness is no longer concentrated, it's dispersed. That dispersion makes crises harder to track, easier to ignore, and far deadlier for families caught between. The human cost is measurable. Families report fuel costs jumping from $200 to $800 monthly when forced to distant locations. Jobs requiring reliable arrival times become impossible to maintain. Children lose school access entirely in some rural areas lacking enrollment capacity. Medical emergencies become life-threatening when nearest hospitals are 40 to 60 miles away. One family tracked their displacement progression. Started in urban center, pushed to industrial suburbs 15 miles out, then to agricultural areas 45 miles distant. Finally to desert land 80 miles from original employment. Each move increased expenses while reducing income opportunities. Within 6 months, both parents lost jobs, children were unenrolled from school, and the family faced complete systemic disconnection. Exactly the outcome enforcement claimed to prevent. For years, RV parks were presented as solutions for displaced families. By 2026, that option has effectively collapsed. Monthly RV park rates now average $900 to $1,500, not including electricity, water surcharges, background checks, or deposits. In many metro areas, rates exceed $2,000, rivaling apartment rents without tenant protections. Availability is the bigger issue. Many parks operate at 95 to 100% occupancy, prioritizing short-term tourists paying higher nightly rates. Families seeking monthly stays are often denied outright, especially those with children, older RVs, or limited income verification. Age restrictions are increasingly enforced. RVs older than 10 to 15 years are rejected regardless of condition. This excludes the majority of families forced into RV living who purchased older units due to cost. Parks can refuse without explanation, leaving families no appeal. Even when accepted, parks impose strict rules conflicting with family life, guest limits, curfews, and zero-tolerance eviction clauses. One complaint can result in immediate removal with no refund. The myth that they should just go to an RV park ignores pricing, capacity, and discrimination realities. By 2026, RV parks function as gated communities, not safety nets, cutting off the last legal option many families had. Parks have become luxury accommodation for recreational travelers, not refuge for economically displaced families needing stability and affordability most. As housing systems fail, enforcement fills the vacuum. By 2026, police officers, not housing specialists, are deciding who can remain sheltered. These decisions happen curbside at night, often under time pressure and complaint quotas. Officers aren't trained to assess housing needs, family stability, or long-term impact. Their mandate is compliance. When families cannot move immediately, citations are issued. When citations stack, towing follows. Outcomes are predetermined. This shift carries serious consequences. Law enforcement interactions escalate stress, especially for children. Data shows increased police contact raises likelihood of family separation, job loss, and mental health crises. Housing decisions made through enforcement bypass due process. There's no hearing before displacement, no caseworker assigned before shelter loss, and no guarantee of alternative placement. Once enforcement begins, outcomes are rapid and irreversible. Cities defend this approach as public safety, but data shows enforcement doesn't reduce homelessness, it redistributes it. Police time is diverted from crime prevention to managing poverty. When law enforcement becomes the housing authority, systems stop asking who needs help and start asking who must leave. Families caught in this shift are processed, not supported. The statistics are stark. Police departments in enforcement-heavy cities report 30 to 50% of officer hours now dedicated to homeless-related calls. Meanwhile, response times for property crimes and domestic violence increase. One department study showed 85% of RV-related enforcement resulted in displacement without housing placement. proving the approach fails its stated purpose while consuming resources that could address actual public safety concerns. One of the most damaging outcomes of RV criminalization is record creation. Failure to move, pay fines, or appear in court results in misdemeanor charges, bench warrants, or license suspensions. What begins as sleeping in a vehicle escalates into permanent legal consequences. By 2026, even minor citations trigger cascading penalties. Missed court dates, often due to work conflicts or lack of transportation, convert fines into warrants. Warrants lead to arrests or vehicle seizure. Criminal records create long-term barriers. Background checks affect employment, housing applications, insurance rates, and even school enrollment in some districts. Families already struggling lose access to upward mobility permanently. This system punishes survival, not wrongdoing. No harm is required, only non-compliance with rules families cannot realistically meet. Once labeled non-compliant, families are excluded from assistance programs requiring clean records. The irony is devastating. The same system denying affordable housing creates criminal records making future housing impossible. By turning poverty into legal offense, cities lock families into long-term instability with no exit ramp. The scope is expanding rapidly. Court data from 5 major cities shows homeless-related misdemeanors increased 180% between 2022 and 2026. Average time from first citation to bench warrant, 45 days. Once warrants exist, families become afraid to seek help from any government services, driving them further underground. Employment applications requiring background checks become automatic disqualifications, trapping families in poverty while claiming to address it. By 2026, RV families aren't simply displaced, they're forced to hide. Enforcement patterns teach families when and where they can exist without being noticed. Lights off, engines cold, no generators, no visible movement. Families sleep in short shifts, rotate locations nightly, and avoid routine. This constant concealment erodes physical and mental health. Lack of consistent sleep increases workplace accidents, academic failure, and chronic illness risk. Children grow up learning avoidance strategies instead of stability. Parents make decisions based on enforcement maps, not safety. Emergency response becomes harder when families fear calling for help. Living hidden also removes families from visibility-based assistance. Outreach teams can't find them. School liaisons lose contact. Medical follow-ups are missed. Isolation becomes structural. This isn't housing. It's survival under surveillance. Families aren't breaking laws to exploit systems. They're hiding to avoid being erased by them. Criminalization doesn't eliminate homelessness. It forces it underground, where harm multiplies and recovery becomes harder. The health consequences are documented and severe. Sleep studies of displaced families show average sleep duration drops from 7 hours to 3 to 4 hours nightly. Chronic sleep deprivation increases heart disease risk by 45%, diabetes by 30%, and depression by 60%. Children show developmental delays consistent with chronic stress exposure. The system creates health crises. It then punishes families for experiencing completing cycles of harm disguised as law enforcement. By 2026, the pattern is clear. Enforcement targets visibility, not root causes. RVs are removed from tourist corridors, business districts, and residential streets, but housing supply remains unchanged. Affordable housing construction lags far behind demand. Estimates show the United States is short millions of affordable units, yet enforcement budgets continue growing. Cities measure success by reduced complaints, not reduced homelessness. This creates false narratives. Homelessness appears resolved when it's only been displaced. Families pushed to outskirts are no longer counted, studied, or supported. Policy decisions prioritize property values and political optics over human stability. RV bans are faster than zoning reform, cheaper than construction, and quieter than structural change. The result is managed crisis, one designed to be unseen rather than solved. Families are casualties of systems optimized for appearance, not outcomes. The budget priorities tell the complete story. One major city spent $12 million on enforcement-related costs in 2025. Citations, towing contracts, court processing, and police overtime, while allocating only $3 million to affordable housing development. That $12 million displaced approximately 2,400 families but created 0 new housing units. Meanwhile, the city's promotional materials claimed significant progress addressing homelessness, citing reduced visible encampments. The gap between spending and outcomes reveals enforcement as performance designed to satisfy constituents demanding action, regardless of whether that action actually helps anyone. The criminalization of RV homelessness isn't isolated policy. It's a test case. If shelter in vehicles can be illegal, future definitions of acceptable housing become narrower. As rents rise again, more Americans will fall outside traditional housing. If RVs are banned today, tomorrow it may be shared housing, converted garages, or multi-generational living. By 2026, this is no longer about RVs. It's about who gets to exist when systems fail. Families are being punished for adapting to economic reality. Once survival becomes illegal, the definition of homelessness shifts from condition to crime. That precedent affects everyone. The trajectory is already visible. Cities are beginning to restrict extended stay motels, limit garage conversions, and enforce occupancy limits, preventing multi-generational households. Each restriction narrows what counts as legitimate shelter, pushing more people into categories subject to enforcement. The underlying question is fundamental. Does society have an obligation to ensure housing exists before criminalizing its absence? Current policy answers no. Enforcement proceeds regardless of shelter availability, treating homelessness as behavioral choice rather than economic circumstance. This framework will expand. Today it's RVs. Tomorrow it's any housing solution arising from necessity rather than market forces. The precedent being set that survival adaptations can be criminalized without providing alternatives represents a fundamental shift in how America treats its most vulnerable populations. Once that precedent solidifies, the definition of who deserves shelter contracts until only those who can pay market rates remain legally visible. When shelter becomes illegal, the system has already failed. If RV living or enforcement has affected your family or your community, share your story in the comments. This crisis stays invisible unless people speak up. And in our next video, we break down how new enforcement laws are spreading city by city and who's next.